My brothers, my sisters, welcome back to the channel. Today we speak not just of Burkina Faso, but of Africa's awakening. If you believe in freedom, unity, and the power of our people, then make sure you subscribe. Share this story, and let the world hear Africa's voice. Because what you are about to witness is not just history, but is destiny. They said the night carried omens. Over the dark rooftops of Ouagadougou, a storm gathered, not of clouds alone, but of history and consequence. The wind cut through the streets like whispers of the past, carrying voices of hunger, of fear, of a nation learning to stand after decades on its knees. Inside the presidential convoy, headlights tore through the rain. Ibrahim Traoré sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the wet glass, watching the city that both loved and doubted him. Power had never felt like triumph to him, only responsibility. Each raindrop that slid down the window felt like a tear he could never afford to shed. The radio crackled. A report about rebel movement in the north, another about medicine shortages. The young leader exhaled slowly. Tomorrow he'd address the nation. Tonight he wanted only silence, a silence the world refused to give him. Then, through the veil of rain, something appeared. A figure, small, trembling, stepped into the beam of his headlights. The driver hit the brakes. Tires screamed across the soaked asphalt. Guards shouted, rifles raised. The convoy halted in the middle of the deserted road. She stood there barefoot, clothes torn, one hand clutched around her stomach. The other lifted weakly for mercy. A pregnant woman, no older than 30, eyes wide with terror. Traoré's instinct moved faster than protocol. "Help her," he ordered. The guards hesitated. The night was dangerous, deception common. But he stepped out himself, rain soaking his uniform, and approached. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She collapsed into his arms, cold, shaking, smelling of earth and fear. When they searched her belongings, they found nothing. No ID, no phone, no trace of where she had come from. Only a small, sealed envelope hidden inside her coat, soaked and illegible. The medical team rushed her to the palace clinic. By dawn, she was stabilized. She called herself Elena, though her accent didn't match her claimed origin. She said she'd fled armed men near the border, that her husband had been killed, that she was trying to reach safety. Traoré believed her. He always believed in mercy first. He ordered protection, food, and care, and for the first time in months, smiled. "A life saved," he whispered. But in another hemisphere, in a sterile control room humming with blue monitors, a voice reported into a headset. "Asset E71 secured. Target proximity confirmed. Phase 2 commencing." The rain outside the palace ceased, but the storm had only begun. That night, Ibrahim Traoré had saved a woman. And with that act of kindness, he had opened the first door to his own undoing. The morning after was drenched in golden light. The city buzzed with quiet routine. Vendors setting up fruit stalls, soldiers patrolling tired streets. Children running barefoot through puddles left by the storm. Burkina Faso was breathing, but painfully. Sanctions had crippled its economy. Foreign aid had strings too sharp to hold. Ibrahim Traoré inherited a nation caught between hope and hunger, a wounded lion still roaring, still proud. He moved through his day with purpose. Meetings stacked like bricks, decisions heavier than lead. Yet the image of the woman in the rain stayed with him. Something about her eyes, fear mixed with defiance, haunted him. He visited the clinic that evening. Elena sat upright, pale but alive. She thanked him softly. The narration swells with tenderness, his belief that every life mattered, that mercy was stronger than suspicion. He ordered a private wing for her safety. He even had books delivered, novels, poetry, something to remind her that life was more than survival. Outside, rumors began. Who was she? Why was she kept so close? The whispers crawled through the marble corridors of power. For now, Traoré ignored them. He'd grown used to whispers. What he didn't know was that inside the palace, every camera feed was being mirrored somewhere else. Each gesture, each document, each conversation copied and encrypted by hands unseen. The woman he had rescued was not just a survivor. She was a weapon wrapped in mercy. Days turned into weeks. Elena grew stronger. She walked the gardens with her hand on her belly, greeted nurses, smiled at guards. Her innocence disarmed everyone, even his most loyal advisors. But when night fell, her eyes hardened. She slipped into shadows, connected a hidden transmitter buried within a locket, and whispered code. Alpha secured, proximity stable. Begin extraction protocols. Each transmission bled coordinates, troop layouts, confidential plans, the veins of the nation slowly being mapped for foreign eyes. Still, she hesitated sometimes. When she saw how Traoré treated his people, sharing meals with soldiers, listening to market women complain about prices, she felt cracks form inside her resolve. Guilt began to live where orders once did. Yet every time she tried to stop, a voice through her earpiece reminded her, complete the mission, or the child dies. She had reasons to obey, secrets buried far from Africa, debts unpaid. The narration deepens, the clash between duty and morality, the quiet war inside a mother's heart. Traoré's advisors grew wary. They warned him. She appeared from nowhere. You're too trusting, he brushed them off. If we lose our compassion, we become the same as those who rule by fear. But even he could sense the unease. Documents misplaced, servers rebooting unexpectedly, the uneasy hum of eyes watching from somewhere unseen. One night, unable to sleep, he walked through the clinic's corridors. From afar, he saw Elena standing by the window, bathed in moonlight, whispering to no one. Her silhouette was fragile yet mysterious. He thought she prayed. She was transmitting. He mistook her silence for grace. She mistook his kindness for weakness, and between them, destiny stitched a tapestry of sorrow. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, something sinister was unfolding. Anonymous news leaks began surfacing, stories claiming the president was harboring a foreign agent, evidence that his government was compromised. Each lie sharpened into public doubt. Across the ocean, analysts watched closely. A man who refused the global order was now inches from destruction, and all it took was a single woman. Elena's handlers grew impatient. They demanded the final sequence, classified blueprints of Burkina Faso's new defense system. She hesitated for the first time, because something had changed. The baby she once used as a cover now kicked beneath her ribs. It was real. Life had grown from a lie, and the man she was ordered to betray had shown her more humanity than her own nation ever had. The hook closes where it began, with a storm. Lightning over the capital, wind tearing banners from rooftops. The power flickers across the palace. Elena stands alone in her room, trembling, staring at her reflection. The transmitter in her hand glows red, final upload pending. Down the corridor, Traoré walks toward her door, holding a small gift, a handmade wooden charm carved by local children. His hand touches the door. She hides the device under her pillow, wipes her tears and forces a smile as he steps inside. He says softly, "You're safe now." The words cut through her like a blade. Outside, thunder drowns the sound of data transferring, a nation's secrets bleeding away through invisible wires. He thought he was saving her from the world's cruelty. He never knew she was carrying the world's cruelty within her. The morning after the storm was deceptively calm. The sun rose over Ouagadougou, clean and golden, as if the night had never existed. The city moved in quiet rhythm, traders sweeping dust from their stalls, children chasing laughter down unpaved streets, soldiers marching with eyes that had forgotten sleep. Inside the palace, everything looked ordinary. But in truth, nothing was. Ibrahim Traoré spent the morning reading reports. His ministers spoke of shortages, unrest, whispers of rebellion in the east. Every document carried traces of unease. Yet, somewhere between the numbers and the silence, his mind kept drifting to the woman in the clinic. Her smile, so fragile, had started to feel like peace in a world that offered him none. He did not know that while he read, a signal pulsed through the air, short bursts of invisible data, bouncing between satellites, vanishing into clouds. Elena stood by her window, the device hidden beneath her shawl. Her hands shook each time she pressed the small button that sent more of his world away. She told herself it was duty, that she had no choice, that the world she served was greater than the man she was betraying. But even lies lose their weight when repeated too often. At night, she heard the children outside the palace laughing, playing drums made of empty cans. She would touch her stomach and wonder what kind of world her own child would be born into. A world ruled by mercy, or one poisoned by fear. Every morning, Traoré visited her. He brought small gifts, a basket of mangoes from the countryside, a hand-woven scarf, a letter written by a schoolgirl thanking him for funding new classrooms. He would speak softly about the country's struggles, about hope, about how the future belonged to those who refused to give up kindness. She listened, silent, pretending to be just a refugee. But in her chest, the battle between mission and conscience began to roar. Days turned to weeks. Around them, tension thickened like dust in dry wind. Rebels moved closer to mining regions. Intelligence briefings arrived redacted, some missing entirely. The communications team blamed technical errors. Traoré's generals blamed foreign interference. No one looked toward the quiet woman in the clinic garden, reading poetry by the fountain, hiding a transmitter inside her book. Her handlers grew impatient. Their messages came colder now. Deliver the defense data within 3 days or you're finished. They reminded her of the people she owed, the debts she could never repay. They threatened the unborn child whose heartbeat she now felt each night. She began to write letters she never sent, apologies she would never read aloud. One evening, as the call to prayer echoed across the capital, Traoré found her by the garden. He told her about a new project, a plan to rebuild irrigation systems destroyed by drought. He spoke with the conviction of someone who believed that even in ruin, the earth could bloom again. She asked why he cared so much when the world seemed determined to break him. He smiled faintly and said, "Because if I stop caring, they've already won." His words struck something deep inside her. That night, when she sent her next coded transmission, she hesitated. For the first time, she replaced one coordinate with a false one. A small rebellion. A single lie to protect a truth she could not yet admit. But her superiors noticed. The next message she received carried no text. Only a sound, a recording of her own voice taken months ago during training saying the oath of obedience. It was a warning, "We see you." Fear wrapped around her throat. She realized that no matter how far she ran, her past had never stopped watching. Traoré, meanwhile, began sensing that something unseen pressed against his life. Files missing, troops arriving at wrong coordinates, unfamiliar faces appearing in briefings. When he asked for answers, he received only silence. At night, he walked the palace corridors alone. He saw the fatigue on his guards' faces, the uncertainty in their eyes. He thought of how power isolates a man, how compassion makes him vulnerable. He told himself that trust was strength. But in the stillness, even he began to wonder if trust was slowly killing him. Elena grew weaker. The pregnancy weighed on her body, but guilt weighed more. She saw him working late into the night, drafting plans for hospitals and food programs while she sent his secrets away. Sometimes she thought about confessing everything, about falling at his feet and begging for forgiveness. But fear of her handlers and fear of his reaction kept her silent. When she looked at him, she saw the one thing she had never been trained to confront, goodness without motive. And yet, the world outside was closing in. A sudden blackout hit the capital. Power grids failed. Communications went dead. In the confusion, rebels attacked 2 northern checkpoints, armed with weapons eerily similar to those supplied by foreign contractors. Someone was feeding them intel. Traoré's council gathered in emergency session. He demanded to know who leaked military positions. No one could answer. The generals blamed internal hackers. The ministers blamed foreign spies. But each accusation planted another seed of distrust. He returned to the clinic later, exhausted, disillusioned, still clinging to kindness. Elena offered him tea. Their eyes met briefly, long enough for her to realize he suspected something, though he didn't yet know what. When he left, she collapsed to her knees, trembling. She pressed her ear to her stomach and whispered, "I'll protect you, I swear." For the first time, she meant it. That night, her handlers sent a new directive. Initiate contingency protocol. She didn't understand at first. Then she read the attached line. Terminate the target if discovery occurs. Her heart stopped. She had been a tool, not a person. Her life, her child's life, meant nothing to the men who commanded her. And the man she was ordered to destroy was the only one who had ever treated her as human. The palace fell into uneasy quiet. Security forces increased patrols. Secret investigations began. Yet the real danger slept inside the very walls they guarded. As days passed, the distance between Traoré and Elena grew thinner. One bound by trust, the other by deception. He believed he had rescued her from a world of violence. She knew she had brought that violence to his doorstep. Each evening, the sun set redder, as if bleeding over the city's skyline. Each morning, the air felt heavier, the silence longer. Elena's mind fractured between two worlds, the mother she was becoming and the spy she could no longer bear to be. She prayed, not for forgiveness, but for courage to end what she had started. And far beyond the palace, in a command room filled with screens and whispers, unseen voices prepared for the next phase. They would not wait much longer. The stage was set. The trap was tightening. And Ibrahim Traoré, the man who believed kindness could rebuild a continent, was about to learn that kindness could also bring it to its knees. The rains did not come that season. The sky above Burkina Faso turned pale and silent, like a lid pressed over a boiling world. Dust coated the fields where crops should have grown. The rivers thinned into mirrors of mud. Children stopped playing outside. The city's noise shrank into the hum of generators and distant gunfire. Ibrahim Traoré walked through the hunger camps, handing out sacks of grain that could not feed everyone. He spoke to mothers who had buried their infants and still smiled at him as if his presence alone kept them from falling apart. He wanted to believe that compassion was enough to hold a nation together, but the deeper truth lingered behind every forced smile. Kindness could not stop a drought, and faith could not outlast the betrayal eating its way into his walls. Inside the palace, Elena felt that same drought spreading through her heart. Her child grew restless, kicking harder now. The midwife said it was a good sign, but Elena knew the truth. Her body was reacting to guilt, to fear, to the poison of the mission that had already gone too far. Each night she tried to sleep, but the voices from her earpiece would return. They had grown colder, less human. "You have 48 hours, they told her. "We need his defense codes, the encryption keys, the logistics routes." "No more delays," she no longer answered. Sometimes she unplugged the transmitter and buried it under her pillow. But it would start transmitting on its own, a light pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. She would stare at it until dawn, trapped between horror and helplessness. One morning, the president's security chief entered his office with trembling hands. They had discovered traces of foreign signal interference near the clinic. Traoré frowned but said nothing. He ordered the investigation to remain silent. No arrests, no alerts. He wanted truth, not noise. That night, he visited Elena. She sat by the window, her face thin and tired, her hands resting on her stomach. When he asked if she felt safe, she said yes, but her voice cracked. He noticed her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying for hours. He told her about the food crisis, the border attacks, the pressure from Western powers demanding he reopen foreign mining contracts. "They call it cooperation," he said softly, "but it feels like surrender." She wanted to tell him the truth then, that she was the wire feeding his every word into their waiting hands. But courage failed her. She simply nodded, pretending not to understand. Days blurred together. Soldiers loyal to Traoré were ambushed at outposts whose coordinates were known only to top officials. His communications minister resigned suddenly. One of the generals stopped attending security briefings. Inside the walls of government, loyalty had begun to fracture. The country felt it. Radio stations whispered of conspiracy. Crowds gathered, restless, hungry, uncertain whether they still believed in the man who had promised them freedom. Elena watched it all unravel, knowing she was the match that lit the fire. Each news broadcast was a blade twisting deeper into her conscience. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. The baby moved less. One night she turned on the transmitter, not to send data, but to speak. "Please," she said into the static, "end this. Let me disappear. He doesn't deserve this." The reply came instantly, cold and precise. "You are compromised. You have one task left. Deliver the encryption key, or your child will not live to see sunlight." Her scream never left her throat. She dropped the device and sobbed until her body ached. The storm outside began again, the kind of storm that shakes windows and hides every sound. She realized the world would not let her atone in silence. The next morning, Traoré stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The horizon was gray. His advisor approached, eyes cautious, voice low. "Sir, we traced the signal. It leads to the clinic." He said nothing for a long time. Only the faint sound of drums from a nearby school filled the air. Finally, he whispered, "No one touches her." "Not yet." He walked to the clinic himself. When he entered, Elena was asleep, or pretending to be. He looked at her, at the fragile rise and fall of her chest, at the small movements of her unborn child beneath the blanket. Something in him broke, a quiet, invisible fracture that no one else would see. That evening, he called for an emergency council meeting. Only half the members attended. The rest had vanished, gone into hiding, or perhaps into exile. Foreign reporters claimed he was losing control. His enemies abroad began calling for restoration of democratic order. Elena saw it all unfolding through the television in her room. Every broadcast was filled with his image, alone, surrounded by shadows, holding the country together with nothing but resolve. And all she could think was that she had built the gallows on which he now stood. She made her decision. That night she destroyed the transmitter, smashing it against the marble floor until it shattered into pieces. Sparks flared, circuits died, but somewhere in another continent, alarms began to sound. Her defiance had been detected. Within hours, foreign agents moved to initiate the final stage of the operation, a coup disguised as an internal revolt. Inside the palace, Traoré gathered his remaining loyal officers. He spoke calmly with the tone of a man who had accepted the cost of truth. "We will hold the line," he said, "no matter what it takes." Outside, the city erupted in panic. Rebel units advanced toward the capital. Drones hummed over the skyline. The streets filled with smoke and screaming. Elena could hear it all from her bed. She knew they were coming not just for him, but for her too. She tried to run, but pain froze her body. The baby was coming early. As the first explosions echoed in the distance, she whispered to the empty room, "If anyone deserves to live through this, it's him." Traoré moved through the corridors surrounded by soldiers. His aides urged him to evacuate. He refused. "A leader who runs leaves ghosts behind," he said. "I'll face whatever comes." He didn't know that in the chaos. Elena was bleeding, alone, clutching the remnants of her transmitter, praying not for salvation but for redemption. And above the burning city, satellites locked onto their targets, guided by the last coordinates transmitted hours before she destroyed the device. The air trembled. The war had begun. He stood at the window of his office, watching lightning flash over the rooftops, and whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the storm doesn't come to destroy. Sometimes it comes to wash the lies away." In that moment, as the first wave of fire hit the outskirts, he had no idea that the woman he once saved would soon save him in return. The palace shook as the first shells struck the outer walls. Smoke coiled through the corridors. Guards rushed through the marble hall shouting orders. The air reeked of dust and burning fuel. Somewhere beyond the chaos, the city was being torn apart. Not by war, but by betrayal. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the war room table, maps scattered across the surface. The last of his loyal generals were bleeding, their uniforms shredded. One of them clutched his radio, whispering that 2 battalions had defected, that the gates would not hold for long. He closed his eyes and took a breath. "Tell the people to stay indoors. Protect the children first. The city can fall, not its spirit." His voice was steady, even as everything around him began to crumble. In the clinic wing of the palace, Elena screamed. The labor had begun. Her body convulsed, pain stabbing through her in waves. The midwife had fled hours earlier. She was alone, drenched in sweat and tears, gripping the side of the bed. Each contraction tore through her like punishment. as if her body wanted her to feel every ounce of guilt she had buried. She heard gunfire outside, boots pounding the hallway. She crawled off the bed, dragging herself toward the small metal case she had hidden beneath the tiles. Inside was the chip, the master access key she had been sent to steal. It was her final link to the agency that owned her. She held it up, staring at it through her tears. Then she smashed it beneath her heel. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder. At that same moment, the power grid failed. Lights flickered out, plunging the palace into half-darkness. From the watchtower, soldiers shouted warnings. Rebel trucks were breaching the gates. Traoré gripped his rifle. "Fall back to the command chamber!" someone yelled. He shook his head. "No, I stay here." He turned toward the corridor that led to the clinic. Something inside him pulled him there, an instinct stronger than duty. As he walked, explosions tore through the outer walls, showering the hall with fragments of stone. He reached her door and found it half broken, hanging on its hinges. Inside, Elena lay on the floor, trembling, blood spreading beneath her. The sound of distant gunfire echoed like drums of judgment. She looked up when she saw him. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then the words spilled out through sobs. "I lied to you," she gasped. "They sent me to destroy you. I was supposed to give them everything, but I couldn't. I couldn't hurt you anymore." He dropped to his knees beside her, lifting her into his arms. Her skin was cold. Her breath came in short bursts. "I know," he whispered. "I knew the night the signals were traced." Her eyes widened in shock. "Then why didn't you—" "Because even a lie can carry truth inside it," he said. "You cared, even if it started as a mission. That's what they'll never understand." She smiled weakly, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." He pressed her hand to his chest. "You gave me something no one else did. Choice. They wanted me to fear. You reminded me why I fight." Her breathing faltered. Take him," she whispered, guiding his hand to her stomach. "Please." "Promise me he'll never grow up to hate." The roof above them shuddered. Plaster rained down. A blast somewhere close sent a shockwave through the room. He wrapped his body over hers as debris fell. When the smoke cleared, she was still. He called her name again and again, but her eyes no longer opened. The faint cry of a newborn broke through the silence. The child had survived. He lifted the baby, small and fragile, swaddled in the torn blanket. Outside, rebel soldiers were closing in. The last of his guards shouted his name, urging him to escape through the lower tunnels. He looked one last time at Elena's still body. Then he whispered, "You wanted redemption." You found it in him. Carrying the child close, he ran through the collapsing hallways, guided by instinct and smoke. Every corner echoed with gunfire. By the time he reached the underground exit, his soldiers had fallen. Only a handful remained to cover his retreat. They escaped into the night through the drainage tunnels beneath the palace. Behind them, the capital burned, flames devouring the skyline. Helicopters thundered above, broadcasting messages of transition and liberation, while the people below wept, confused and afraid. Days later, in a small village far from the city, a young woman found a man sitting beneath a baobab tree. His clothes were torn, his face marked with soot and exhaustion. In his arms lay a newborn wrapped in white cloth. The villagers did not know who he was. He simply asked for water and silence. He buried something near the roots of the tree that night. A small locket with a broken transmitter and a strand of a woman's hair inside. As dawn rose, he whispered to the child, "Your mother was brave. They will write lies about her, but I will tell you the truth." He looked toward the horizon where smoke still lingered. "The world will call me lost, defeated. But as long as you live, so does everything we stood for." The baby stirred in his arms. Somewhere far away, news channels celebrated his fall. But in the silence of that village, a new beginning had already been born. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind passing through the trees. It carried her voice, soft and distant, saying the words he would never forget. "You are kind, and they will never win against kindness." He smiled faintly, a tear cutting through the dust on his face. Then he stood, child in arms, and walked toward the rising sun. The man the world believed destroyed was still alive, broken, Yes, but unbroken in spirit, and in the small heartbeat of a child that wasn't his by blood. He carried the redemption of a love that began with deceit but ended with truth.